All right, so let's go ahead and look at hot potato first. And like I said, this one's a little tricky in and of the fact that you have to kind of think of some math here to do this one. So let's go ahead and do this. This over and put this in a comment. And everyone can see my screen okay?
Yes.
Cool, thank you. Let's see here. Don't and then right up. Give us okay. Give us a couple of examples here. Okay, so getting undefined because we're not returning anything out of here. Return num of turns. So now we're just returning the numbers out. Okay, so I know that my parameter is getting passed in. I'm seeing what I'm expecting to see. All right, so let's break this one down here a little bit. So we know that we have one input, which is a number, and it's the number of turns that is played in the game, right? And we have one output, oops, which is also a number, and it's the number of the player that the game ended on. Let me just read that to make sure. So you're a teacher of a class with 5 students, student 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? So we're counting like a computer, we're 0 indexing. And you want to play a game of hot potato. Initially, you give the potato to student number 2, and after each turn, the student will give it to the student on their right. So student 0 will give it to student 1, student 1 will give it to student 2, so on. Student 4 will give it to student 0, right? So we're going in a circular motion. Now, where this gets a little tricky, and right off the bat, right, is we've got 5 students, but in our head, the highest student number we have is student number 4, right? Because we started with student 0. So what is something that we can do to basically represent that rotation when we're counting?
An array?
An array,
So, like
go
for
ahead.
the students?
So an array would be a little difficult. And also is probably a little bit overkill in this instance. The mathematical operator we could use is the remainder operator. right? Or what we were kind of loosely throwing around as the modulus, but the remainder operator. And so that's kind of the mathematical concept that I was talking about, where it makes this tricky. And so if we look at, so if we have, and this is the other thing too that makes it easy for us, is we know every single time that we're starting with student 2, because that's what it tells us. So right off the bat, I can say const student equals 2. So again, it's just a little wrinkle in there to try and make the challenge a little bit tougher. I mean, we could have just started with student 0 every time, right? And like it probably would have made it a little bit easier to do the concept of the counting. And so we know, and student 2, they're not the second student, right? They're the third student. So we've got 0, 1, 2, and then 3 and 4. And so if we take 2 turns, right? So if we start at 2, take 2 turns, right? We end on 4. And if we start at 2, and then we take 3 turns, right? We don't end at 5, we end at 0, right? And so if we use the remainder operator at that point, right? So console.log five, remainder 5, right? We get 0, right? So now basically we started at student 2, and then the first turn is student 3, the second turn is student 4, and then the third turn, student 4 passes it to student 0, right? And so that would be starting from 2, the third player would be 0, which is, so if we look at it, if we were to kind of unroll it, where we said 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? That's where we're at. So we're always starting right here, right? And then so we say 1, 2, and then there's our third turn, right? That's where we stop. And so in this, once we go over this, this will continue to repeat itself, right? And so if we do something where we were to, so we've, at this point, we've taken 3 turns. If we were to take 8 turns, right? So we said 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This is right where we're at again, right? And so if I take, and if we start from 2 and we add 8 turns to that, we end up with 10 turns total. And when I do this, there's my modulus or my remainder of 0, right? And so that is the pattern that we're looking for. And so if we say, and let's go ahead, let's make this a little bit more, let's say starting student equals 2. And so if we say basically that the number of turns is less than, so if the number of turns is less than 3, right, we don't need to do any fancy modulus operator. We can just basically, because one, if we're going by modulo 5, right, so if we were doing, well, actually, I believe it'll still work out. So I don't want to make it overly complicated, right? So 4 would be 4, And if we took one turn, we're ending on player 3, and that's player 3. And if we took 0 turns, we would basically be ending on player 2, which is player 2, right? So we don't, because it does not go evenly into this. The remainder is just a number. We kind of took a look at that yesterday, right? So we could say if starting student plus number of, plus number of num of turns, and we would say modulo or remainder, I gotta quit saying that, remainder 5, right? And we want to make sure that these get added together first. That then we can then actually, let's see what happens before we even put that in an if statement. Let's just see if we can return that and make this work. Overcomplicating this. That. Right, so there's that. If I get 1, I would hope that would give me 3. It does. If I get 7, right? So if we think about that, I took 7 turns, right? So if we come back up here to this, we start at 2, right? And we go to 7 turns. I would hope that this would end on player 4. There we go. There's player 4, right? And so the same thing, 7 plus 5 would be 12. And so I would hope that we'd be on player 4 again, if I'm doing my math right, still on player 4. And so I was about to make this more complicated than it needed to be. And this ends up being fairly simple. And we could even, with something like this, maybe even get away with doing that. And then just saying this, right? And so now we've got a very small function. Does this make sense? So one way we could make this a little better maybe is by also, I like the first thing that pops into my head is this function is only good if we have 5 players, right? So we could add a parameter to this, right? So we could say num of turns, num of players. And I'm hoping, and again, I could be going out on very thin ice on this, that this would calculate correctly, because I don't know if there's any magic behind the number 5. But I would be curious if we're starting at 2, and let's say that instead of, so if we said 5, right, like, oh yeah, we won't worry about that one right away. So if we said 6, right, we would still expect to see 2 out of this one, because we haven't taken any turns. We start with 2, we end with 2. We'll see if this gives me what I think it will. Okay, so there's my 2. All right, so if we took 1 turn, right, there's 3. And if we took 2 turns, there's 4. If we took 3 turns, there's player 5. Now remember, player 5 is our 6th player because we've started at an index of 0. Player 4, back to player 0, right? And so if we take 5 turns, there's 1. And so now if I bump this up to 11, 6 more turns, I would hope that I would get 1 again, and I do, right? And so now just by adding this flexibility in here. So when we do this, this is called hard coding. And this basically, once we do this, it's making it dynamic. And so now, instead of having to go in and change the code every single time the number of players changes, we can just do it when we call our function, right? And then if we were, say, like, if we wanted to do a hot potato tournament, we could basically set this so that we ask for that input at the start of each game where we say that. And we could probably even go like even further out onto a limb and say like starting player, right? And so this now turns to starting player. Again, when I say all of this stuff, I don't know if it's actually going to work or yet, not off the top of my head. So we'll see what happens here. All right, so we're still at 1. And so if we started with player 1, I would expect that we ended at player 5 now. Or I'm sorry, player 0. And then if we went to player 0, we're at player 5, right? So we're still following that same pattern. So now we can enter in the starting player, and probably what I would do here, just because of the order that we see these in the function, starting player, and then grab that and do this. And like if we were going to start doing it, right? Like if I've got players of 6, like I don't necessarily want to be able to have a starting player of 7. So now we could kind of broach the concept of error handling. So if this number was ever greater than this, instead of starting the game and returning it, we could return a string response saying that the starting player, like this starting player, does not exist. So yeah, that's kind of where we would be at on this one. Are there any questions for hot potato? Okay, so are there any other challenges anyone wanted me to tackle before I start employee data? I can also do other challenges after employee data, but employee data is kind of the top of the mountain for this class. It's all anticlimactic after we solve that one. Yeah, go for it, James. Okay, so James is asking about the ternary operator. Absolutely. Let's go ahead and let's do code ternary.js. All right, so a ternary operator is basically a short form if else statement. And so it doesn't work everywhere where an if statement works, right? So we have methods that maybe we just do an if clause, right? Like if this happens, do this, otherwise do nothing. And technically you could do a ternary and it just returns an empty string or it returns null, but that's not the same as do nothing, right? So like you're technically not doing nothing at that point, like you're returning null or you're returning an empty string. And so we don't necessarily want that side effect. But what it does do is it allows us to basically write very short if else statements. So for something like, let's do if, oops, media device info. So let's do let number num equal 7. And we could say if num modulo or remainder 2 equals 0, console.log even, else console.log odd, right? So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines of code, basically, to be able to do this. And so if I run this now with the number 7, I would hope that I would see it go to, whoops, module not found, not, oh, sorry, because I probably haven't saved it yet. There we go. There we are. So it returns odd, right? And if I change this to 8, it returns even. Now, a ternary operator is basically just using a short form of an if-else statement, using a question mark and a colon for the basically to separate the conditional logic and then the two choices. So I could say, let example equal num remainder 2 triple equals 0 question mark. So now I've entered the ternary statement, and the first choice is always the true case, the second choice is the false case, and I could say console.log even colon, and now I'm into the false case, console.log odd, right? And now let's comment this out for right now. And if I do console.log example, right, there's my even. And then same thing here. If I change it back to 7, there's my odd. All right. So does that help with the ternary? And ternaries, so ternaries are not always the best choice. Sometimes they can get a little messy, right? And so I could do something like this, like let's extend this. We could say, oh, let's see here. How do we want to do this? If else, or is it it's else if? So a ternary in itself is limited to 2 choices, but that's actually what I'm going to demonstrate is that you can do nested ternaries. And we use a ternary because the ternary sometimes can be easier to read and it takes up less space than the if else statement. But we'll also show you where maybe you're right, you start off as a ternary and it starts to get a little complicated on you, so it's better to then switch back to an if else statement format, right? So we could say else if num well, here we'll do this, we'll do num remainder 2 equals 0, and we'll make this even, and we'll say here and num greater than 10, call this like big even, right? And so now if we're here, here, and then else, we can go here and then say console.log odd, right? And so we take this out of here again, and so here, and we run it, right? Oops, why am I getting voice? 7 if num is equal to 7. If 0 else console out log. Why did I not get a oh, because I did code instead of no. So there's our odd, right? And then if I change it to 8, there's our even. And if I change it to 12, there's our big even. And again, like order matters, because if I put this in the if else case, I would always hit even first, even if I was above 10, because it would meet this criteria first. And so now I could say something in here like, right, so I could say, and num greater than 10, right? And then in here, do, oh, how would I do this? Or actually, I would do it this way. I would go this way. So basically, if I hit here and then inside here, I would do num greater than 10 here. And then if that's true, I would do console.log big even that. And then if I save this, so the software will reformat for me. But now this gets a little bit more difficult to read than this. And so this is saying if num is remainder 2 is 0 and num is greater than 10, console.log big even. Else if num is remainder 2 is 0, just console.log even, else console.log odd. This one would read as if num remainder 2 equals 0, then enter this next ternary, and it's saying if that's true, check to see if num is greater than 10. If that is true, return big or console.log big even. If that is false, console.log even. And then if this original ternary was false, console.log odd. Right, and so we could do the same thing in here. That, right, so there's my big even. And if I change it to 13, right, there's my odd. If I drop it down to 8, right, there's my even. And so both of these are doing the same thing, right? And now if where it would get really bad is if I change this into an if else if and said num modulo or remainder 2 not equal to 0 and num greater than 10, right? Console.log big odd, else console.log odd, right? And so now I would have to come in here and then say this would be, so it'd only be false. So I would just need to do num greater than 10 question mark. It's the false, the true would be console.log big odd. Right. And so this kind of gets like, it gets less explicit, right? Like this is telling me if this happens, else if this happens, this, I really have to start keeping track of things. Right. And then if I wanted to add cases in for like say really big even. So if greater than 20, it's really big even, or really big odd, then I end up putting another layer in. But if I came in for code review of another developer's work and I saw something that looked like this, I'd be like, you need to change this to either like a case statement or to move it back to like an if statement. Right? Like this is starting to get a little bit much. So, and again, I'm just trying to think here. So like, if we wanted to do that, so let's take a stab at that once real quick. So we could say else if, and then we could up here, we could say if right? So now we're still checking for that. And then here on this first case, we would be num greater than 20 question mark. And then if that's true, we would do console.log really big even, else we would check here, right? And so now like now it's turning into a hot mess. And probably what I would even do here once my if statement hits something like this is, so I'll leave this up here for demonstration purposes, but I would then probably start to look at something like this, right? So it would be if num, that can stay, and so we're here, and then I would say if oops, no, 20 right, and probably reformat it into something that looks like this, just because now I'm saying if it's even, okay, go in here now, is it bigger than 20? Is it bigger than 10? If not, just do this. Or if I don't hit this case up here, then do this check down here, right? And this takes up a few more lines of code, but it can be a little bit more readable, especially if you end up with, say, like a third check that you need to do, or it basically, sometimes it's always the balance of giving up or taking up space versus making things so compact that they're more difficult to read, right? Like this is the least amount of code, but this one by far and away is the most difficult one to read. All right, so any other questions on ternaries or when to look at them, when not to look at them? Yeah, no problem. All right, cool. So, and again, I'll make this available. I'll drop this into the intro to code when we're done. All right. So the last one, well, not the last one, but the big one here is employee data. All right. And I know Yazid took a stab at it. Did anyone else take a stab at this? No worries if you didn't. This one's a brain bender. So like I said, the first time I taught this class, I tried to live code it in front of the students and had like a mental breakdown. Like I basically was like red in the face being like, oh, these guys think like I don't know what I'm doing. And was just like super embarrassed and then said like, I need to look at this offline at a different time. It was luckily for me, it was the first time through and we didn't record, like I didn't record that session. So it does not exist unless someone was recording it for me. But no, like, I mean, full send, like honesty, like it was horrible. Like I was like, oh, I can tackle this. And I started it and just nothing was going the way I thought it was going to go. And because I got like flustered, like it's kind of like the public speaking thing. And I enjoy public speaking, but if anyone's ever done public speaking, even if you enjoy it and things start going against you, like it's very easy to lose your cool really quick. And I definitely lost my cool. And I like past that, I think I tried to tackle it on like the third or fourth night of class or whatever. So I don't know that anyone was even ready for it, let alone myself. And it beat me up really bad. So this one's kind of been my arch nemesis. And I did a dry run of it last night without like having to look anything up or just like kind of like working my way through it. And that's what I'll do again today from scratch, but we'll discuss some of the concepts that are going on here. And I will have to say, I had never seen it before. And I showed it to another dev on my team that's been like a dev for like 8 years, and they were super blown away by it too. But Yazid had sent me a snippet of his code, and when I was running it in the console, it was like throwing me for a loop because I had no idea what was happening. I thought like my terminal was broken, but Yazid, you introduced me to console.table. And so you may have found a previous version of like session 8 or session 9, but I was not recording the first time I taught this class. So I don't think that's it. If that's I see we threw a link in here. Oh, Rick roll. Nice. That's awesome. No, there is a older version of session 9 where I do this, and it's great because one of the students was arguing with me. But luckily I had already had my feet underneath me at that point, so I was okay with it. But the first time through, I cannot stress how close I was like crying in front of the class. Like I was getting ready to turn my camera off. I was getting so frustrated. So what was I going to say? Yes, Yazid, console.table. How did you find out about that?
Just Googling it. I just found it. I was like, oh, that's nice. And I tried it. And the way it showed with the index is so nice. You guys should try it instead of console log for the arrays.
Yeah, so for tabular data, console.log. So if we do employee data, we'll see it in like the standard node employee data. Like we see it in like the standard object format, right? And this is an array of objects. So this is what's referred to as tabular data. And if we change that console.log to console.table, which it's there, and there's a whole bunch of console methods, and most people only ever use console.log, and I run that same thing, it spits it out like this. And it took me like 10 minutes to figure it out. Like I was like, do I have a plugin? And like I was creating another object and it wouldn't work. And finally I was like looking through your code and I was like, console.table. I've never heard of that before. So that's a cool little trick that you taught me. So let's go ahead and talk our way through what we're thinking here. And with this, we have employee data, right? And so inside our employee data, if we look at this, so let's go ahead and take a look here. I'll write it down here so we can keep reading it. All right, so we have one input, and our input is equal to an array of objects, right? So we see the square brackets, that means we're in an array. We see the curly braces, that means we have an object, right? And so the keys are comma separated, and then our objects are comma separated inside the array. And so it looks like an array of objects. Each object has the keys of name, title, salary, and bonus. Now,
can you show us the original question of what we're solving for?
Yes, sorry. Let me start off with that. Pull up the README. All right. So this is the instructions. You are a new programmer at your company. Your CFO needs some data regarding all the employees. Your CFO needs to know the number of employees per job title, the average salary for that job within the company, the average bonus that job title receives within your company, and the average total compensation for that job title. You're given an array of objects that represent all of the employees in the company. You need to parse through all the employee data and return an array of objects that represents each job title and the corresponding compensation data, including title, total employees, average salary, average bonus, and average total comp. Right, and then I've already copied over the employee data. Excuse me, so that's exactly like this. And then the example output data is also square bracket and then curly braces, right? So we've got our input is an array of objects, and our output is also going to be an array of objects, but notice that our keys are going to change. All right. And so I'm not going to copy and paste all this over here because we won't be able to display it all on the screen at the same time. But so there is the employee data, and then here is the example output, right? So we've got title, total employees, average salary, average bonus, and there's a spelling error here. It's instead of AVT, it should be AVG. All right, average total comp. Now, when we look at this, so we know that same thing here, one output equals an array of objects. Each object has the keys of title, total employees, average salary, average bonus, average total comp. All right, so we can see that the only thing that we really bring over from our input array is or array of objects is the title, right? That's the only thing that stays the same. And we're also organizing them by title, right? So if we look down here where I spit out the tabular data, right? Everybody's got different salary numbers, but everyone is going to have one of 3 different positions, right? So and everyone's got a different name. And because we are basically asking for numbers that are dependent upon position, to me immediately, that's our common ground right there, right? So like that's what we're going to base this off of. And that's what we're going to kind of use to guide us as we move through this. Now, if we take a look here, and again, everything we do, we want to do it iteratively, right? Like I'm not just going to slam down a bunch of code, take a bunch of steps at once, and then hope for the best. We're going to go ahead and walk through this step by step. We'll do get employee data, and then we're going to feed it. This employee data is the name of, yep, that. All right. So first step, let's go ahead. We've got that. Let's return our employees. So there's that. So there's our array of employees. And I won't do console.table here right now because it's going to look like different things as we go throughout. And I don't know that all of it will fit into the table format. All right. So does anyone want to take a stab at what, like just in plain English, like what do we need to do first? Like we don't have to think like a computer right now, but what do we need to do to the first thing that we need to solve for?
I would say
Number.
the titles.
Position, yeah, the title. Like number.
Right. So we need to start pulling information out of here and grouping it by title, right? So any thoughts on what type of data structure we could use to hold that? And this is tricky, so don't get frustrated if nothing's coming to mind.
I mean, would it just be another object?
It would be an object. And so you're right there. You want to take a stab at what the key and the value would look like?
Here, I've got it pulled up here. So the key and the value is going to be, I can't remember what that trick was where you said like, it was like let element of employee data equal base. So you could say like let name of employee data equal basically like 0.
But well, we don't
0,
need to,
1. I don't know.
we don't need to get into implementation yet. We're still talking about design, right? So we know that I need to pull out the information from each employee, basically, right? And then we're going to say let parsed data equal an object. So
the title is going to be 1 for each of those, I guess.
well, so it wouldn't be a title of 1, right? Because and I guess we're not, the title is going to be designer, the title is going to be developer and product manager. But if we're just looking at an object here, like what do we want the object to look like? What are we holding inside there? Like what do we know what we want the key to be?
Title. I mean, we
Yeah.
have the example of the output data down there, so.
Yep. So, well, this isn't going to look like the output data yet though, right? So, but you are correct. The key so it's not going to be title but the key is going to be the title, right? So we're going to have a key of developer, right? And then if the key is developer, what do we think that we might want the value to look like? What do we need to track?
How many there are?
Yeah, so well, we need to track basically three things, right? So we need to track total employees, salary, and bonus, right? Like the average total comp is the combination of these two, right? So we don't need to create a value for it. So if I have to track three separate numbers, what would be a good data structure to store that in?
An array?
Yep, an array. And remember, keys will always be either a string or like we can do it in like the key notation where we don't wrap it in quotes, but values can be anything, right? Like they can be numbers, they can be Booleans, right? We can make them other objects. We can also make them arrays, right? And then, so now I need to track the total number of employees, the salary, and the bonus, right? And so let's go ahead and take a look at what it takes to do that. So what do I need to do to iterate through an array of objects?
A loop?
Yep, so can look at doing a for loop here. So I'm gonna go ahead and just comment this out for right now. We don't need it for anything. But let's go ahead and say console or whoops, for let I equal 0, I less than R of employees dot length. That, and then I plus plus. Right, and so now if I want to look at each individual thing here, console.log, I could look at R of employees box I. And so let's get rid of that return for right now. And if we run this again, right, so now notice how like we have the brackets here, which means we're reporting this inside the array. Now there's no square brackets, right? So like I'm spitting out each individual person. Now, and so now I'm at the level, I'm inside the array and I'm just looking at the object. What I don't need name, right? I just need title, salary, and bonus. So if let's just say that I want to console.log the title, what would I do up here?
The title.
You can do dot title, but because I'm already doing box notation here, I would probably keep it with box notation like all the way across. It's just a little bit easier to read. Right, so I can do this. I could also basically do this as well. It's just like a style preference at that point. But because there's certain things I can box and there's certain things that I can do with dot notation. But because I have to use box for certain things, I'll probably use box for everything just to keep it a little cleaner. You get the color coordinated brackets in there that help delineate what's going on. All right, so now if I run it again, all right, so now I've got a developer, product manager, developer, designer, product manager, right? And now if I want to look at salary, there's my salaries. All right, so now I'm basically, I'm getting each individual person, but I'm just console.logging them out. I want to start creating my keys, right? And so if I come back over to here and I type in, what was the one that we worked on? Number of characters. right? So when I did number of characters, right, I had some conditional logic in here that, and we have to kind of write it backwards because of the case, but basically I'm saying that inside of my object for results, I'm asking if it has a key of the character that we were creating. And if it doesn't have that key already in existence, I want to create that key, and I'm only tracking one value here, and I'm assigning it a value of 1. Each time after that, that I run into the same letter in here, that would basically result in a duplicate key. Instead of reassigning a value of 1, I am incrementally adding 1 to that value. And that's how I'm keeping count of all of my different characters, right? So that's how I get the different number of characters that are in my string. I can use this exact same concept when I'm doing this over here. So, and I'll leave this here just because this helps me keep track of how I'm accessing everything. I'll comment it out for right now. And I can say if, let's see here, your parsed data has own property, right? And remember, my key was this. Right? So I can say this. Right? And I'll leave that empty for right now. And I'll come down here and I'll say else. And so if it doesn't exist in there, what I want to do is say parsed data, this, and this is going to be my key. Oh, I've already got this in queue. So I'm creating a key that is basically going to be equal to the title that I'm coming across. And then I want it to equal a count of 1. So I have 1 employee, right? And then I need this and this. And instead of just title, I want it to be salary. And I also want it to be bonus. All right. So now that I've got this laid out, right? So I can say here, and I can say, nope, sorry, I don't need all of this, but basically now what I'm doing is instead, because now I've built my array, now up here, I'm going to modify my array, right? And so what I can do is say parsed data. Oops, here, let me make sure I'm looking at this right. Parsed data, so is going to be by key, all right? So I'm getting parsed data by this title, and then so that's good. And then inside the array, I'm going to say 0. Let me do this to help keep everything straight. So inside of our object, we see a key value pair that looks like this. Job title num of temp salary and bonus, right? So this 0 right here is basically my number of employees. So I want to then increment this by 1. And then this one, I want to increment by the salary. And this one, I want to increment by the bonus, right? So number of employees is always going to be incremented by 1. This one, I'm going to add the salaries together, salary and bonus together. All right, so now let's go ahead and we're not returning array of employees anymore. We're going to return parsed data. Let's go ahead and take a look at that. Oh, oh, sorry, I've got an extra comma here. All right, so, and again, same thing here. All right, so unexpected token. So that's telling me like I'm missing a bracket somewhere. I've got an extra bracket, in this case, an extra comma. Wherever I see this red line, right, expression expected, this isn't the problem. It's telling me that whatever is right before this is broken. So I immediately went to over here, said, okay, I've got, if I get rid of that, I still have to get rid of this one as well, because I'm not inside of creating the array anymore. Also, I need to change this to 0, 1, and 2. And so let's go ahead and take a look at this. All right, so now I've got a developer. I've got 3 of them, 382,000 and 39,000, because I'm not finding out an average yet. I'm just basically adding everything up into the same array. Is basically array values in the value for my object that I've assembled, which is parsed data. Right? I could, let's see, what happens if I do this? Right, so that's what it looks like when we do console.table. All right, but what I'm seeing here, right, is I've got pretty much everything I want for right here. Right, I need my title, I need my total employees, I need my average salary. So that is going to be this number divided by this. My average bonus is going to be this number divided by this, and then total comp is going to be these two numbers added together. Any questions as far as what I've done so far with this one?
What is the else statement doing? Guess I'm not fully clear on that.
What line?
Starting at 60. So it goes through the loop and then it hits the else.
Okay, so this is basically, so again, in plain English, what we're doing is we're creating an object called parsed data, right? And we want to create a key value pair of a job title, and then that's the key, and then the value of the number of employees, the salary, and the bonus, right? It's all stored in an array. And so what this is saying is, does parsed data already have a key that is equal to the title that you're looking at, right? So when we iterate through R of employees, right, the first thing we do is we're saying our employee, or basically employee data 0, so the 0 index position, does this title developer already exist inside parsed data? All right, and if it does, we're going to modify the existing value. If it does not, we're going to say, okay, please create the key of that job title and then assign it a value of an array with 1, because there's 1 employee at this point. It's the first one we've ran into. And then add in the salary and add in the bonus. And then the next time through, right, so we're at employee data box 1, we say, does it have a key of developer in here already? And at this point, it now does have a key of developer. So this returns true. And we come in here and we're basically saying, okay, for the key of developer, for the value of it in the 0 index position, increment that by 1. So this goes from 1 to 2. Add the current salary of the employee that we're looking at to the existing salary field in there, and then add the current employee that we're looking at bonus to the existing, right? So that's the plus equal. So we're adding it to the existing value that's in there. And we'll loop
Got
through.
it. So the The
But-
else is essentially picking up the first instance of that title.
Yeah, and it's a little bit backwards, and that's why I left this blank and wrote this first. But you always want to avoid, like, I could flip this, like I could put a bang operator in front of it and then put this up here and move this down into the else case, like it flips when they would occur. But whenever you can write something without a bang operator, you should, just as like a matter of style.
Okay.
All right. So this is basically the first half of what we needed to do. We've parsed the data, right? And so we've got the data that we need, but we have not put it into a format that looks like this yet. All right. So now what I would do is I need to basically come back up here and I need to say let result equal an array, right? Because our return value is an array of objects. And so here's my empty array. And I basically, inside here, I need to create an object that is going to be title and then what do we got here? Let me just grab this. Right, it's basically going to look like this. And so how do I add elements to an array?
Is that unshift?
Push.
Push. Yep. Shift and unshift. You will keep adding them to the front. Well, so was it shift takes them off the front, unshift adds it to the front, push adds it to the back, pop takes it off the back. So technically you could use push or unshift, but like to get it in this order, I think we use push, but either one would work. But almost always, whenever anything gets added to an array, I almost always see push. I don't see unshift in production very often. Let's see here. So let's go ahead, add that space in there. And then, so we're done with this loop up here. We've built our parse data. So now we need to basically go through parse data. And when we want to do a that's the one. Right. We're going to look at all the way back to the beginning here. Iteration, right? So for an object, we write a for in loop, right? And so if I want to go through and see each key in there, right? I just basically will do let key in object and then do my iteration, right? So let's go ahead and grab this. Come back over here and it won't be object one, it's going to be parse data, right? And so if we come in here and we do console.log key, right? I see developer, product manager, and designer. So those are just the keys. Now, if I do parsed data, and then key. Now I see my values, right? And so if I want the number of employees, 0, right? So there's the number of employees. 1 gives me my salaries. 2 gives me my bonuses. All right, so now basically as I iterate through each key in here, each key value pair, what I can do is extract the data that I need out of my existing object with the key and then the array and create a new object. Right? So I'll leave that here for right now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say results. And now that I have an array, results dot push, and I did call it results, right? Parse data result. That was the issue. Result dot push. And then I'm going to do I need a format, so I'm just going to do this of title and so this is the format that I wanted in. And instead of developer, I can just do key. And then for total number of employees, I can do parsed data key 0. Oops. So this is going to be salary is in the 1 position and bonus is in the 2 position. And because I want the average, I'm going to divide those total values by the number of employees that I have. And then for this last one, I can do that. Right, and then now I'm pushing that, and instead of returning parse data, I want to return result. And now we've got developer, total employees, average salary. We've got some trailing stuff here to worry about, trailing stuff here as well. Right, but this is basically what we were looking for. So when we come down here, we see the same thing, right? So if I look at designer, I've got 2 of them, 82, 250, 750, and then 90,000, right? So that's basically our answer. And what I would do, and I'm going to do it to all of them, just because even though I don't have any trailing decimals right now, to basically future-proof this in case I do down the road, is I would go ahead, I'm going to wrap this, and I'm going to do parse int. Right, and this is going to force it to an integer. And if I just push it back to log, scroll down here a little bit, right? Developer 3, 127, 333, 13,000, 140,000, 333, right? So this is our answer. Any questions on the second half of that?
Does the parse int ignore the title because it's a string?
Well, I'm not.
Or is that not part of the nested array that you're working with?
No, the title up here is like, if I did not wrap this in parsing, I did not wrap
Oh, right. Okay.
total number of employees either, because that's always going to be, it's always going to be a whole number unless we start counting half employees. But because there's division involved with this, with the averaging, I had to wrap these three in parsing. If I took this and wrapped it to parsing, I'm pretty sure I would get not a number. Yeah. So that's basically just telling me what I'm trying to change into an integer can't be. Right, and then kind of if we were to look at the same thing here, and I were to, like, this is, like, even if I get rid of the notes, so let me go ahead and do this once real quick. So this is get employee data, and I'll grab all of this. And take all of this, put it right down here, and we'll call it get employee data 2. Right. What I would look at is if we were to start to clean this up, take these notes out of here. All right. So this method or this function does two things, right? Like it parses my data and then assembles a new object. So probably what I would look at doing here is maybe breaking these out into some helper functions so that this becomes a higher order function and it uses other functions to get the job done, so that we, if anything were to change, I don't have to dig through all of this logic again. So like if I knew that I was just parsing the data, it's fine. If they wanted a different information in the report, like if they didn't want the salary or the average and they just wanted like the total cost of that type of employee, like I would look at breaking this out into something a little bit more flexible. And so what I would do with something like that is basically say, let's go ahead and do this. And so let's say const parse data equals, and just to keep the naming simple for right now, we'll leave the name the same. And I would put this down here. And then what I would do is I'm returning this. And so I would say parsed, or let parsed data equal object. And then out of here, I would return parsed data. And then up here, I could now delete this and say, let parse data equal parse data are of employees. Right? And let's go ahead and we'll copy this, we'll comment that out, and then we'll come down here and we'll run employee data 2. Right, and I'm still getting the same answer, right? So that means I haven't broken anything, so that's good. Right, and then next, what I would do is basically take result, and let's go ahead and we'll call this const assemble job averages. Call this data. This one will probably take a little bit of Parsed data. And so then I would say, basically, I've got that, and instead of result this, so we've got that. Parse data is still getting passed in. Got all of that, and then we're going to return result. And then same thing up here now. I can take all of this. Delete it. Whoops, I went too far, sorry. Employee data 2. So I can take all of this and delete it. And I can make result be assemble job averages and then call it with parsed data and now return result. Oops, so that's empty. So I broke something there on that one because I did parse data instead of parsed data. There we go. We're back to getting our answer again. All right, and now what this does is, let's say that my CFO comes to me and says something like, I need you to tell me what the like the total cost is. Like I need, instead of average, I need total number of employees, total cost, total salary, total bonus, right? And now I could write another function that calls parse data and use this part all over again without having to rewrite all of this code inside of a like get employee total cost, right? And then I can write a new like assemble for total, or like assemble job totals, right? And then I don't have to reuse this part. I can just reuse this part. And if I leave them inside here, I end up having to copy it, and then I have double the amount of code that I actually need in existence. And that comes back to the dry code, that don't repeat your code. And then I would think that probably the next thing that I would do is probably look at taking this for loop out and making it a map. But that, in an instance like this, I may just leave it in a for loop. Right, so but like I could look at doing like parse data R of employees dot map, and then you, and then call employee, and then if let's see, let's comment this out here for a second. And do console.log employee. This may blow up on me. Oh, there's that. Okay, so that's what I'm seeing. That, and then nothing else happens. Like I'm not getting my object anymore. So that's what I want to see. So it's the same thing. So now I could say if employee dot title. So now we've got this and say parsed data has own property employee dot title. I'll stay consistent. Employee box title. Is that if okay, yep. So that all lines up, and then basically grab this stuff. And this all gets changed to just plain employee. And then there's the other side of if is that this. Closing bracket here. There we go. That, and then all of this. Also gets changed to employee. Oh, looks like my style guide is adding that back in for me. All right, so there's that, and then I'll leave that. So here's another thing. When you are rewriting code, don't, like if you've got something that works and you want to start working on something else, comment it out, don't delete it, right? Because I don't know that this is a valid replacement yet. And when you're using an IDE, you can use Control-Z or Command-Z to undo. But you, like when you do normal computing, like your word processing, stuff like that, you may have to Command-Z back like one or two things, or get rid of a couple of lines that you typed, or undelete, like undo some deleting. You have not known frustration until you max out the queue of undo while you're writing code, and you've ran out of your undo queue before you get to the point where your code was working again. Because I think like the max undo you can do is like 20 or 30 times or something like that. And if you've made like 40 changes and you start like undoing it, you can only get back like 30 steps, and then you're totally broken and you don't know where to go anymore. It can get pretty rough pretty quick. So that's why I say if you're going to replace some code, always comment it out and get what you want in good shape to replace it with before you completely delete the other code. Because right now, like if this doesn't work, I'll just delete it and then uncomment this and go back about my merry way. All right, so there's all of that. Okay, so we've got some errors here. Let's take a look. Employee I, that's okay. So this is a good one because I am no longer iterating through, I don't need these I's anymore. Or I'm not iterating with a loop with the counter of I, I'm mapping, and I'm isolating each employee value separately. So let's get rid of those. All right, now it looks like I'm back in business. So before I write a loop in production, like I'd probably write that map. Now that I know my map is working, my answers still look good, right? Designer 282, 250, 775, 90,000. All right, so I'm good across the board. So now I'm good to delete this. All right.
I have a question.
Yes.
The commas on line 112, 113, and 114. I guess what do they do?
Well, these ones are because arrays are comma separated, right? My style formatter, like my linting is automatically pushing it to that, but this is what it looks like, right? So I'm
Got
in
it.
an
That makes
array,
sense.
right? So that's what it should look like. So because this is the first time I run into an employee, so I'm creating the key right here, which is the title of the employee. Then I'm giving it the value of the employee count of 1, that employee's salary, and then the bonus. And then
And
because
they're
I've
not
got,
needed
go ahead.
are they not needed above in 107, 108, and 109? Because that's just pushing more data to the
Right.
sections that were already created. Okay.
Yep. Yeah, because I'm not in an array here. I'm accessing an array by its index position. And then I'm modifying the data inside it. Right. So like
Okay, perfect.
in the number of characters, right? Like we are only tracking one value for the key, right? Versus like what we're doing over there is looks more like this. Right. And so if they wanted to do something like this, like, I mean, we could get crazy with this and say, we could do something like, give me the count, but then also give me the index of the first time the character appeared in the string, right? And then it would look like more like a, and then we'd have an array and it'd be 1 for the count, and then we did the quick bread. So all the way there at the end, so I could say like 174. That was the index position of the first time it ever appeared. And if we're tracking multiple
Okay, that
values,
makes sense.
yeah, we want to throw it in the array. And but to do that, that would look like, and basically I would have to do at that point, because now we're in an array, like I'd have to do 0 here, and then on this line, basically whatever I would need to do to capture the index, I'd have to put a 1 there to be like equals index of first appearance, right? And so that's what we're doing. And then, and it's the same thing, right? Like if there were more categories, we could keep extending our array, right? So like, what if in here, like we did like year-to-date hours, right? And said 750, right? And then we did that. Then all we would do down here is we would create the parse data R of employees I title box 3, right? And we would just keep going and making our array bigger and bigger to hold however many things we were trying to capture. All right, so now we've basically taken out our for loop. I'm okay doing the for in this one versus doing the map, because I'm going through the different keys and I'm actually going through a object. So I'd be happy using this syntax here, so I don't need to change that to a dot map. And then, which I can't even change it to a dot map when you can't do a dot map on an object, only on an array. So this to me is looking pretty good, right? I've made it reusable. right? So I could say like get employee average comp, right? And now I could write another function that says const get employee total comp. And now I can reuse parse data, and then for assault or result, like I could just write another function that instead of like assemble job averages, I could say job totals, right? And this is way easier than having to write two separate functions where 60 or 70% of the code is identical, and like writing it twice. Like this would be an issue where like if I came in and whatever a year ago they wanted the report with the average data, and then I'm a new developer and they send me in there and they say we want total data now, this would be like a change that I would look to make, so that if now it gets easier and easier to write additional reports for my CFO, and that's called refactoring. Okay, so looking through here, again, this is my third time doing it. Well, third time in front of people. I've done this 3 times in front of people, and probably I've gone through this problem like 7 or 8 times total now. So that's why I can explain it with confidence. Plus also, I would have a much better, like where I am at today versus where I was at a year and a half ago, like the first time I taught this, like I'm fairly confident, like I would be able to walk up to a similar sized problem and lead a class through this. Versus like a year and a half ago, like, I mean, full candor, like not lying to you guys. And again, big, dumb, tough Marine grunt, like getting ready to cry in front of a group of like 30 brand new soft, like people interested in learning and development, because like this thing beat me up so bad. Right. And so don't sweat it. Just because you see someone doing it and they're making it look easy, it doesn't necessarily mean it is easy. And with practice and repetition, and that's the other thing too, is like as a existing software developer, if someone came to me and said, hey Charles, I need you to generate this report for me in our reporting system, the first thing, I wouldn't start trying to write it from scratch. Like I would say, okay, well, I already know we have a get employee average comp. Let's go in there and look at that. And what can I use out of here? Like I know my employee objects are the same, like my employee data structure here is the same no matter where I go in the software. So I don't have to rewrite all of this on my own. I don't have to figure this out on my own. I'm going to grab it. I'm going to move it out into its own separate function, and then rewrite this original one so that it uses what I pulled out. And then I'm going to use what I pulled out and basically use that to help start building all the new reports that I have to write as well. And that just comes from experience and being able to look at that. But you, with any problem that I try to tackle, if I don't already have like a high degree of confidence on how I'm going to tackle it, I'm going to start looking around in the existing code that I have to see if there's something that, if it isn't dang near an exact match, it's going to be really close to it, so that I can identify the pattern that it's using and basically lift that pattern and reuse it for what I need to accomplish with it. Well, the Code Platoon gave me the challenge, so I don't know that I can ask for the rights for the recording of the explanation. I'm just sampling. But yeah, outside of that, that is the employee data one. We've got a half hour left. I can answer more questions. I can stop recording and answer more questions if you want to do more day in the life stuff. If there's another challenge out there that anyone was struggling with and we can take a look at it, I am happy to take on one more challenge for the evening.
I have a question. What do you recommend that we continue doing before completing the application?
Do you know what one you're trying to apply to?
I think it's Delta, the part-time one for October this year.
Okay, so
I think
let's
is in
look.
July. I think it's due.
Yeah, so July 10th. All right, so that's, I mean, that basically gives you 2 full months to keep cranking on this. So here's my advice, and this is how I studied for it, is I basically ran through free code camp. And I wonder if, let me see here. Pulling this up on my other monitor because I'm pulling up my email account. But if I had my original acceptance letter from Code Platoon still, I never delete any emails, so I might. Code Platoon acceptance from Rod Levy on October 2nd, 2018. All right. Well, there's nothing attached in here. But I don't know if they have any, like, if they, when you originally like did intro or like showed interest in the program, like if they provided anything or not. But what I highly recommend is freecodecamp.org. Again, it's the JavaScript algorithms and data structure. It says 300 hours. At this point, it will not take you 300 hours. Well, I will also say, I was over the weekend, I was just looking at some of the challenges in here. I think I knocked a couple of them out. Signed into my account. Yeah, the intermediate algorithm scripting. Like I answered. So like there's some good challenges in here, right? So like seek and destroy. You will be provided with an initial array, the first argument in the destroyer function, followed by one or more arguments. Remove all elements for the initial array that are the same value as these arguments. And it looks like it erased my answer, but yeah, like this one was a good one. It was a fun challenge, and they really get you up to it. But if you can make it to basically like through the intermediate algorithm scripting, you've got, like, I wouldn't worry about doing the projects at the end, and you can absolutely. And in fact, like palindrome checker is probably what we already did with palindrome, but it looks like maybe they're solving for some special cases there, right? So like we solve for spaces, so we already know how to use regex and replace at the global scope, and we could make our regex a little bit more complicated. But like you will already know how to do some of these, but doing it again, like I said, I was not able to do this the first time I approached this problem, but now that I've done it multiple times, I can do it. It's the same thing. Like the basic JavaScript, I mean, there's 113 things, but like I said, the first one is create a comment, like create a multi-line comment. Like that's not going to take you a bunch of time to do it. So I mean, divide one number by another number, right? Like you could even, and you're unless you really want the certificate that they give you, you don't have to complete all the sections. So you can start reading these and keep going and going as long as you're comfortable, right? And then maybe you get to one like create decimal numbers with JavaScript. If you don't remember how to do like the two fixed or whatever. But then like start diving into it where you need it. And then as you get towards the end of it, like I mean, manipulate arrays, we covered that, write reusable JavaScript with functions, just global scope versus local scope and functions. Like a lot of the stuff we've already covered, but going through and seeing it a second time is going to help reinforce it. And I cannot remember what it's called, but it's the learning concept of seeing like this. I think it's spaced repetition, right? Like where you see something and then you see it again a week later, and then you see it again a couple weeks later, you see it again a month later, and you're able, like, you don't need to hammer the same thing home every day, but you need to hammer it in the beginning, and then, but you still need to constantly refresh yourself, and the time intervals keep getting further and further apart. So I would highly recommend free code camp. If you get through this and you're still looking for additional challenges, I mean, Coder Byte, Leet Code. I'm not a big Leet Code fan because they tend to ramp them up a little too quick for new developers. I think there's like Coder Dojo or something like that, which is like again, it's just challenges. And I want to say there was like a Code Platoon team. Or maybe I'm in the wrong site. Oh, it looks like a school you can go to, but yeah, they're
You're talking about Code Wars?
that might be it. Yeah, this is it. So log in, sign in with GitHub. Right. So yeah, like I'm already on the Code Platoon team or whatever, and you can see some of the people have really cranked it out. But here you could also, and what I would say too is if you get accepted, right? So like if you take it, you get accepted in July and you're not going to start until October, is don't stop between July and October, keep going. Like you don't necessarily have to do the same breakneck pace, but keep going with JavaScript. Maybe buy pick up a book if you want to. Start playing around with Python, because when you walk in through the door at Code Platoon, you're going to start working in both JavaScript and Python within the first 2 days. Like the first day, they're going to give you a bunch of Python problems to solve, and the next day you're going to get the exact same problems and you're going to solve them in JavaScript. And there's like little intricacies and syntactically different. You'll need to do the same problem solving, but getting comfortable, like a little bit of exposure to Python before you get there isn't a bad thing. And there's also, and again, like I think most of you appreciate the difference between just like trying to hack at something yourself versus doing like something instructor led and the ability to be able to ask questions. But I'm a big fan of Udemy, and all these courses never pay these prices. These guys have a sale like every other day, and all of these things drop for like down to $10 to $15 each. Like, I mean, I don't even know, like every time they go on sale, I just like buy a bunch of them. I haven't used all of them yet, but like one of these days I'll get around to using them. But like, yeah, my learning, right? Like, I mean, I've got whatever 46 courses I've bought on here, and I've probably never paid more than $15 for a course. But like, I mean, here, like you can get things like JavaScript, right? And like you do JavaScript, and sure, the coding interview, bootcamp algorithms and data structures, the complete JavaScript course. And again, like once these go on sale, and it'll be on sale like within the next 10 days, it'll go back on sale again for like a week. They'll go down for like 10 to 15 bucks a pop. Right, so the complete 2022 web development bootcamp, and this one looks like it's all JavaScript, like they're teaching MongoDB and Web3 instead of like Python. But all of this stuff would be great, and it's just more exposure to the concepts that you're going to see in Code Platoon. And again, it's not the same experience as going to Code Platoon, and it's like pre-recorded videos, and I'm not a huge fan of using JavaScript on the back end, just like using Python or Rails or something like that. But there's all sorts of courses out there that you can keep going with it. And again, 10, 15 bucks, even if you don't want to spend the 10, 15 bucks, like there's tons of free resources that you can find out there. And if you get Operation Code, cool. Yep. And yeah, and if anyone here hasn't heard of Operation Code, they're definitely worth checking out. I mean, they have a really good Slack space, a pretty supportive community. But yeah, and there's lots of resources out there for vets and mill spouses to get shifted over into a tech career. And then, like I said, once you get into Code Platoon, I'm the mentor coordinator. So right now I'm like knocking on everyone's door, asking if they're willing to mentor a student in the upcoming cohort, and trying to put together like a new exit interview with all of the outgoing ones to see what we can do to improve the experience for everyone.
Thank you. Do you, I don't know if you can really say, I haven't seen the questions yet, or like the like projects that we have to do for the application. How do they compare to the challenges that we were doing here? Or I guess the more complicated ones.
You know, in fact, I just asked for access to them today, so I started poking around at them today. And I don't know if they're all ranked in order of like difficulty or not, but I know like the last one, there's like, I believe there's 12 challenges in total, and the last one almost no one gets right. But it's not you're not required to get all of them right to get into Code Platoon. And like I was looking at the last one, and I'm pretty confident I can solve it, but I was just like, ooh, like it would not be one that I would relish solving for the first time in front of a live class. So I'll put it that way. But again, from what I've heard from the instructors, like most people and other students, like most people don't get that last one right.
That's comforting.
And again, looking at it, I don't think there was anything formatting. Like, I don't know if it auto formatted the code or not, but again, like, and that's what I like VS Code. Like I do all of my own formatting, but I'm sure it drove a couple people crazy because like, I mean, I was going back and correcting all my spacing, even though like the code was working without it, or like Replit isn't yelling at me for it, but like, it's just as a matter of habit. Like I'm always trying to keep my code organized as possible. And so again, I don't know that there's any type of grading criteria for it, but definitely when you do the challenges, try and keep your code as organized as possible. Make it easy on the people that are grading it, and also make it easier for you to keep track of what you've got going on, right? Because again, this is way easier to read. Oops. Than that, right? Like that becomes a mess. And the same thing, like it's this, like using this type of formatting versus doing something where it's all strung out. And let me see here. I can say JavaScript style guide. Yeah, this is a bit much. And I mean, just know that you can Google style guide and it'll give you, like this is the Google one. I saw Airbnb has one, right? And so, and it's basically why, and so, and that's the thing is like a lot of these big frameworks, so like React again is probably like the largest JavaScript framework. Like they're maintained by large companies that use them, right? And a lot of web development is what's called open source. And so like you'll see like Airbnb, what's another big tech company that like maintains like a framework that you wouldn't even know that they're the ones that maintain it, right? Like you wouldn't be like, oh, okay, like a bunch of developers that work for Airbnb were the people who originally invented this framework. And you'll run into that in different frameworks. But yeah, it's all open source, and the like we try as a community to be collaborative, right? So I mean, like 482 people have added just to the style guide, used by 834,000 people, right? And you can look at React. No, I think React was invented by Facebook, if I remember correctly. Yeah, Facebook open source. Right. And so like instead of just writing this big giant thing that makes it easier for themselves, like they wrote it and then they shared it with the rest of the world. And now it's been adopted. And it works great for them too, because now they're getting outside contributors, outside opinions and resources. I mean, Facebook's a massive company, but probably when they invented React, however many years ago, they weren't nearly as big as they are today. Yeah, so the as far as the hardware setup, when I went through, you had to go through on a Mac. I don't know that they still do that today or not. I know all the instructors will use Macs. As I've shared with everyone, the saga of my eyesight, like, yeah, I mean, my eyes were so bad, like I couldn't work on a just like, and I've got a 16-inch MacBook. Like, I mean, I've got my company bought me a MacBook, and it's like it's a 2019 16-inch MacBook. Like, it's really nice, but like I had to have the resolution cranked all the way up, and the same thing. I had two 24-inch monitors that I've had for forever, and my eyes got so bad that I couldn't even really work on those anymore. So I had to buy two 32-inch monitors. But I would say, I mean, at a bare minimum, you can absolutely make it through Code Platoon with just your MacBook. But getting at least one additional monitor will make your life a lot easier. The ability, because like right now, and I'm looking right here, like I'm on my MacBook, my web camera is like right there. I have everyone's Zoom cameras pulled up on my Mac screen. And then I've got my notes on one monitor, and then I'm sharing my third monitor where I'm demoing everything for class. And same thing, like especially if you're attending remotely, like you're always going to have Zoom open the entire time, and being able to have Zoom and see what's going on in class and talk to the instructors and manipulate those buttons, and also be looking at your code at the same time. I'd say like having at least one external monitor of a decent size, like whatever is decent for you. Like if you're cool with a 24-inch monitor, go for it. I mean, they've gotten significantly cheaper over the years. I mean, you can get a pretty decent 24-inch monitor. I know, because I just broke one of my wife's when I was moving it. I freaking snapped the edge off it. I banged it into the wall, and that was $140 for a replacement on Amazon. So yeah, you can get a new 24-inch HP monitor for about $140, plus local tax. But like, as if you become like, you keep moving forward with it. And for me, that I work at home, and I'm in the middle of like house renovation, but once I'm done with that, like I want to upgrade. Like we're moving, I have a 3-family and we're moving to the top floor of the house is going to be all remodeled. We're each going to have our own home office space. And like, I'm going to like put some money into improvements in my office, but like at this point, like this is kind of my chosen career. But just for Code Platoon, I mean, at a minimum, you'll want your laptop. It's a nice to have if you can get one external monitor. And then depending on how you feel about working on a laptop, like I do not, like there's like a comic out there where it's like, oh man, I'm so glad I got rid of my desktop and I now have the portability of a laptop computer. And then they've got like a million things plugged into it. And that's me. Like I've got my Bluetooth keyboard and a Bluetooth mouse because I hate trackpads. And same thing with the Mac. Like if I just have I hate trackpads the most, but when I'm typing on my Mac, like my wrists are always smacking into the trackpads. And the one thing where Windows is definitely better than Mac is that when you typically turn a PC on and you had something paired to it, like it'll kick right back in, or at least my HPs would do that. With a Mac, basically like if you restart your computer, you lose all of your Bluetooth until you log back in again, which is probably a nice security function. And maybe HPs do that now too, because of the security aspect of it. But like whenever I start my computer up in the morning, like I have to open it up, type on the normal keyboard, and then all of my Bluetooth kicks in once I log in.
I actually have a cheap suggestion for everyone for taking notes. If you have a glass desk, you can put a piece of paper underneath the glass, and it becomes a whiteboard. So you'll see I have my work desk set up the same way, as well as a whiteboard on the wall. But I mean, it's free whiteboard pretty much if you already have a glass desk.
Yeah. And I mean, instructors are different, but like when I went through, the instructor didn't, like when he was talking, he didn't want anyone on the computer. So when if you'd wanted to take notes, you had to basically like write the notes physically. So I mean, like when I graduated Code Platoon, like I had a whole notepad full of scribble. But I will say that too, is if you go like, and when they're teaching class, like listen to the instructor and not type. Like it's very, and that's the downside of multiple monitors, is like you can have the instructor pulled up and listen to him talk while you're playing solitaire on the other monitor or whatever. Humans are notoriously bad multitaskers. Even those of us that think we're good multitaskers, like the science behind it is that like it's not an even, like if your attention span is 100 and you split it between two things, it's not 50-50, it drops to like 25-25. And if you split it between three things, it's not like basically take 50 and divide it by 3. It's like you end up giving like 5% of your attention to 3 different things. So he was big on like everyone having their laptop lid down when he was talking, and if you wanted to take notes, write notes. And I will say that even if you're like remote and you have to have your laptop up, like I would have like the Zoom room and either turn off your other monitor and write the notes, or just have like a Word document up. Don't have like a web browser up where your attention can start to stray. All right, and it is about 8:56. So we didn't even take a break tonight. Again, I am happy to hang out as late as everyone wants to if people have questions for me. If not, we can call it the end of class. But if there's more questions, feel free to throw them out. I'm happy to answer them. And if nothing's coming to mind now and we close the meeting and you go, oh crap, I should have asked him that, slack me. Just because class is over, like I said, I'm here to help. So.
I just want to say thank you. I know you're a volunteer. I mean, this has been great.
Oh, no, I get paid.
Oh. Well, still thank you.
That changes everything.
Yeah, screw that guy, right? No, no. This is it's a paid contract position, and it's not anywhere near what my day job is. But no, they pay me, but it is something where I really enjoy doing this. So that's why I'm not just showing up and putting in the bare minimum and collecting the paycheck. Like I really enjoy helping you guys, and anyone that wants to like. This has been like a super rewarding life change for me, and I'm here to help anyone else that wants to try for it. So. Yeah, and again, can't stress it enough. Don't be shy about reaching out to me. Don't be shy about reaching out to the intro to coding channel. Like I say, in the last time I taught this, one of the students that like messaged me constantly is graduating tomorrow from Code Platoon, from the Quebec Platoon, and I had just gotten a message a couple of weeks ago that one of the other students that was really active the last time I taught this just got into Romeo. He was super excited and wanted to let me know that he was going to that. So, and definitely stick with it. I hope Code Platoon is an option for you, but even if Code Platoon doesn't work out and you want to keep going and keep learning, I mean, I highly encourage it. It's been it's being a software developer is a pretty rewarding career. It's a lot of fun. There's a lot of job security in it. And even if your current company doesn't work out, I mean, like it's just such a growing sector of the job market right now. And it's going to keep going that way.
Thank you.
Yep. Yeah, if there's nothing else, everyone have a great night. So I'm going to go ahead and stop recording.